Welcome to Betrayal of a Nation. The Constitution is null and void, a 6-part series of panel discussions centered around the topics highlighted.
Trina, take it back. We're not live yet.
Okay, it says live.
Okay. All right. I think my computer is lagging then. All right.
Welcome to Betrayal of a Nation. The Constitution is null and void, a 6-part series of panel discussions centered around the topics highlighted in the documentary Betrayal of a Nation, which I co-produced. My name is Trina Asidu, and tonight, as promised, we are live here on Facebook, and our talkback will be on Clubhouse at 9 p.m. We would love to hear from you, so please join us and share in on your thoughts. Just as a reminder, we will be live here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for the next 4 weeks. Tonight's show is part 2 of the discussion, the Tuskegee experiment. I would like to ask each of our viewers to please take a minute to share this live video and personally invite 5 people to join this discussion. We are trying to galvanize support behind this documentary, and we need your help.
So I am Brandy Webb. I'm the director of Betrayal of a Nation. Betrayal of a Nation is a documentary that puts the United States government on trial for crimes committed against Black and Brown citizens. So Betrayal of a Nation will be premiering soon in the upcoming weeks. Once we're able to make an official announcement, we will let you know where and when to tune in. So in the meantime, allow tonight's discussion to get your wheels turning and your fire burning. So I'd like to introduce tonight's amazing panelists. I'm excited to bring to you Michael Obi. Michael is a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Michael has done extensive research on the historical Black press. He's the author of Black press coverage of the Emmett Till lynching, a catalyst to the civil rights movement. His published work on the Tuskegee Airmen include interviews with several of the famous flyers. Michael is also featured in the Betrayal of a Nation documentary, and he currently teaches communication classes at Clark Atlanta University, in which I am an alum of. So next, we're proud to bring back Shanice Jordan, who dropped some gems last week on part 1 of this series, which focused on Black Wall Street. Shanice was born and raised in New York City. Her family has a long history as community activists for urban developments in New York City. She also had the opportunity to live in the South, where she learned more about her family's roots and the history of Black triumphs in the South. Shanice is also an avid researcher filled with a wealth of knowledge.
We are also pleased to introduce to you Daryl Moore. Daryl is a Fayette, North Carolina native who holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in education and personnel administration from Tuskegee University. Daryl is the grandson of Nathaniel Dennis, number 315 on the list of untreated men in the syphilis study. He is a professional actor. In 2009, he had a speaking role in the movie Lottery Ticket. Not only has Daryl worked in front of the camera, but he has also worked behind the camera as a casting director, producer, production assistant, and assistant director. And he recently completed writing his autobiography titled Feel My Pain, as well as a script for his first film project titled Invisible Man, based on his autobiography. And last but not least, we have Janasia Phillips. Janasia is a junior at Tuskegee University, majoring in diuretics and a minor in biology from Jacksonville, Florida. At Tuskegee, she serves as the president of the university's ambassador program and the chief of staff of the Royal Court. Janasia aspires to be a director of nutrition and performance for a major sports team. Some of her passions include cooking, poetry, and educating children on gardening and healthy lifestyles.
Oh, cool.
All right. Okay. Let's get this thing started. So Before we begin this discussion, I'm going to play a clip from the documentary about the Tuskegee experiment.
In Tuskegee, Alabama, 399 Black men, 25 and older, unknowingly sacrificed their health as guinea pigs for a secret research study held by the U.S. Department of Public Health Service, a government agency. The Tuskegee Institute partnered with the agency and was credited for the experiment.
The goal of the Tuskegee experiment was to see how untreated syphilis would manifest itself in these Black men.
The study was named the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male.
They put up flyers advertising to get men involved in this.
Sharecroppers and other men that could not afford to go to a private doctor signed up by the hundreds to participate in hopes of getting free health care. All of the men in the study were told they had bad blood and would be treated for life. Aside from treatment, they were promised free meals and burial insurance.
All right. That burial insurance was contingent upon these men signing off to allow these doctors to perform autopsies of their body. Let's be clear. This was a constitutional violation of the 14th Amendment, which entitled these men to life and liberty and also equal protection under the law. The health of these men declined because of this study, thus diminishing their life. They were deceived and weren't given the liberty to make decisions for themselves. This was criminal negligence. This study was not being done on white people in America, so these Black men were not equally protected under the law. And with that said, it's time to kick off this conversation. The Tuskegee men were offered free meals, free treatment, which they've never received, and burial insurance. Many sharecroppers saw this as a good deal. Daryl, was your grandfather a sharecropper, and was this ever discussed within your family? Why did your grandfather see this as a wonderful opportunity?
Well, he didn't see it as an opportunity. My grandfather was a sharecropper. Yes. They were misled into thinking that this was a golden opportunity for them to get free health care. That's how it was presented to them. There's always been this misconception that the university played a part in it. They used the facilities because the hospital is on the campus. The university had nothing to do with the experiment. This was a government experiment. They just happened to use the hospital that's on our campus, John Andrew Hospital. It's no longer open. But my grandfather, the government sent people out in the community. They found people like nurses and what have you that they figured the local people would trust. And they sent them out and they said, well, hey, we're doing a test and for bad blood. That's what they called it, bad blood. So these guys, like my grandfather, had a second grade education. So most of these people were uneducated and they leaped at the opportunity to get a free health screening and to get something to eat. You think about it, when this experiment first started, it was in the 30s, 1932. And so it lasted for 40 years. So these people were coming out of the Depression. Most of them had large families, sharecropping, which means you basically was working for nothing because you had to pay the person whose land you were farming on first. And if there was any money left, which most of the time it wasn't any, you just was struggling. So that's how they got them. And my grandfather happened to be one of the people that they victimized, along with a couple of my cousins.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you briefly share with us the history of the Tuskegee University and its direct involvement in the experiment? Experiments?
Yeah, like I said, the hospital where they were doing most of the experimenting and the treatment is on the campus. It's right on the side of the campus. And as a student, I used to have to drive by it every day because that's the hospital my grandfather passed away in when I was 10. Their involvement was simply because of the fact that they had the hospital there, and they used that hospital instead of the VA, which was about 1.5 miles further past the campus. They'd used, instead of going to the VA, they did it right there on campus. This was a government experiment. This really wasn't the university per se.
Okay.
It was the only thing that ties it in. The name Tuskegee, people automatically thought over the years that Tuskegee University had something to do with it, or Tuskegee Institute at that time, and they didn't. It was just, they used the hospital that was on campus.
Okay.
This was the federal government.
Okay. So Tuskegee University was funded to assist in the study.
No. Fred Gray, who ended up representing, attorney Fred Gray, who ended up representing my grandfather and other victims. No, when the settlement was reached, it was all with the federal government.
Thank you.
Janasia, can you tell us give us a little history on the university itself, Tuskegee?
Yes, like Ms. Marsh said, a lot of common misconception is that the university had something to do with it simply because it was in Macon County. But the John A. Andrews Hospital was the only hospital that African Americans were even allowed to even go to at the time. So a lot of these men, once they started experiencing some of the symptoms of syphilis, they turned to that hospital in order to seek treatment. And that's what makes Tuskegee more so involved, because it was on the campus. And Tuskegee is the first baccalaureate nursing program in Alabama. So a lot of the Black nurses that were there were trying to treat these men. And a little bit of history just on Tuskegee. We were founded July 4th in 1881. And we celebrate July 4th as the Founders Day of Tuskegee, not Independence Day. But right. Booker T. Washington actually wasn't the founder of Tuskegee. It was actually Lewis Adams and George Campbell. And Lewis Adams was actually trying to run for a political position, and he was trying to secure the Black vote. And so George Campbell came to him and said, well, if you create a school or you allow the government in Alabama to give an appropriation for a principal to come to Macon County, then that's how you would secure the Black vote. If you provide an opportunity for Black teachers, provide an opportunity for them to earn an education. So that's how Tuskegee came about. And it was actually the Tuskegee Normal School for Teachers. And it's had about 4 name changes since then. And it was more so a trade school. As we all know, Booker T. Washington, that was his whole ideal, that if white people had to come to us for not only as carpenters or as plumbers, then they will have to respect us. So Tuskegee started off as a trade school and is now more involved in STEM programs like mine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Professor Obi, how do you think we can best recognize when something that looks seemingly great is actually detrimental to our health? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that, as we kind of talking about this in the context of in this historical context. If I can just kind of steer away from that, because a couple of things I wanted to add to what they were saying about bad blood and in the historical context, what bad blood is or what it was back then. You know, basically that described several different things: syphilis, anemia, fatigue. So, you know, it didn't necessarily describe just what syphilis was. I mean, again, these people who were treated with syphilis probably didn't even know that they had syphilis. And that's interesting to me because, you know, you're thinking that you got, again, fatigue or anemia or something else, and then you're just kind of being observed to see how syphilis is going to manifest in you and receiving no treatment. It's really interesting to me. Another thing that I want to say, that I want to add to what you all were saying about that burial insurance thing. The burial insurance in that situation was conditional. You know, you couldn't get the burial insurance unless you signed up to have an autopsy. So you had to like agree to have an autopsy so they can kind of observe what happened to your body and after your passing, or you didn't get the burial insurance. I want to add those kinds of things. You know, as you asked a question, you know, how do you tell if something is, it maybe not be so good to you that you think might be? That kind of makes me think about where we are today. And I know we're going to possibly get to this, and I hope I'm not jumping the gun with this whole COVID-19 thing.
Yeah,
Because,
we're definitely going to get to
so
that.
you don't want me to go that far?
Yeah, so you can just hold
Okay.
on, save that for
I'll hold off on that. But you know, I don't, you know, that's an interesting question. And again, in the historical context, you know, these people didn't have to have the benefit of education like that we all do have on this panel, where we can kind of discern if things aren't quite right. As Brother Moore said, you know, these people were sharecroppers. You know, they didn't know, you know, they're getting free meals, they're getting what they think is free medical insurance, they're getting exams and all this kind of thing. And they thinking, okay, well, that is a good thing, whereas it really wasn't a good thing because this disease is kind of destroying their bodies.
Thank you. This next question is for Shanice. We'll start with Shanice, and then we can go around the table to respond. So some of these men were drafted into the military. By then, which was in 1947, penicillin, a cure for syphilis, was on the market as a source of treatment. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, asked the military, another government agency, not to treat the drafted men who were in the study. What does this tell you about the nature of the relationship between the Black man and the government, according to your opinion? And then we'll go around the table.
Okay, yeah, so it's all right for me. I have plenty of my great grandfathers who have fought in the wars, especially World War II, and I have other distant family members who fought in like the Vietnam War. They were Green Berets, so they've always showed their dedication to the country, even if it was by force. So the relationship that I'm seeing is that a lot of times when we are joining the military, as I am a vet myself, is that we come in with the idea of gaining respect, right? There's this notion that Black people, we have a hate for America, but the reality is that we just don't like the system that basically govern us. That's the problem that we have. But we are very patriotic people about where we're from, what city we're from, and even the neighborhoods, the blocks, the streets. We rep all that to the, you know, to the day we die, a lot of areas. So I'm seeing with our government, and I've, as a person who's been in, a lot of times, you don't really have a choice. As I said, I've been in, there were times where I was even forced to take certain vaccinations because it's government issued, you know, and in a sense of where these particular gentlemen, they were denied treatment because really they were seen as property. You know, they were property to that study. So because they were property to that study, they still had to see how quickly could it pass. This is my opinion. So it seemed like they wanted to see how quickly could this spread within or amongst the colored soldiers at that time. You know, what I understood about syphilis and the way how they said the origins were started was actually through same-sex couples. So if I'm gonna just be, you know, a little bit of TMI, I'm sorry, but in the military, some of these things do happen. You do have certain type of same-sex relationships that do happen. That's my guess is the reason why, because I've even read that they wouldn't, even no matter where they traveled to, it wasn't just in the military, even if they skipped town, their names were documented in the system, and the doctors would see their names pop up and they were not allowed to still get treatment, you know? So it wasn't just the government. We're talking about state level, we're talking about local level. You go into a neighborhood doctor and you're basically personal property. And it makes me feel, it kind of puts me back in that mindset. When I was signing my name when I died line, I knew I was kind of signing away my life a little bit. I knew that whatever vaccine or whatever thing, I mean, there was times where I had to get a SARS shot. I'm like, we haven't even uttered the word SARS in years. Why don't I need to get a shot for this, you know? But I knew when you sign up for certain things, unfortunately, even though I was young, but it's like, it's a sense of loss of self, because you're like, you know what? I understand that unfortunately, if you want to put it in very blunt terms, I'm considered property. I'm considered military property, government property. You know, my life is on the line. If I die today, hey, yeah, my contract might give my family 50K, but they're not going to really give me much back, you know, or even my soul back. So it's a long tell. And even when I look at, I do a lot of ancestry research for people. And when I look at their family members, and I'm like, listen, most of our great grandfathers have served this country. And it's like, when do we get our respect for the bloodshed, for our blood? Anything that we put inside of this particular government entity, and we're always kind of treated like a label, a number.
Thank you, Shanice. I'll throw that question now at Daryl.
I sent you an email or something I want you to take a look at offline, but I want you to think about something with these men. We mentioned how they traveled, they went elsewhere. They never treated these men's wives and girlfriends or their offspring. I'm the grandson of a man who was in this experiment, and the health problems that went through his bloodline because of what he went through, you know, skin irritations, respiratory and breathing problems, mental problems. I mean, it's just a laundry list of stuff that just steamrolled through the generation. And okay, they eventually treated these men after they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. But what about the wives? What about their girlfriends and their children, their grandchildren? That's what it was just a very racist and cruel thing that they did to these men. And my grandfather always stressed to me, because he was uneducated, to always make sure I got my education. He said, because if you don't, they will treat you the same way they treated me. And he said that until the day he died. And I watched him die in a hospital that's on the campus where I graduated from college. And every day I would drive past that building 4 or 5 times a day. Because I'm from there too. So I'm not just going to college there, I'm from the community. Because my father's from Macon County, my mother's from the county next door, Bullock County. And so I grew up with all these people. A lot of these men that were in that experiment were still alive when I was a child. And the last one died about, I want to say 10, 12 years ago. He was he was over 100. And my mother and brother were caregivers to the next to last one to die. He lived to be 98 years old. And the only reason he ever got treated because he left the South and went north, he used a fake name and got treated. That's how he ended up getting cured. But he never married, never had children, but because it had done so much damage to him internally.
Yeah. You know, you read about these stories, it's definitely heartfelt and heartbreaking. But then when you actually hear it from someone that is a descendant, it's that much more felt. It just really makes you really understand it beyond the fact of just knowing the stories that we read online and that we do the research about. When you're hearing it firsthand from, you know, a relative.
I have a lot of anger that it took me years to deal with. A lot of anger. I mean, just put it in your mind for a minute. Every day after school when I was 10, by the time he got treated, emphysema, tuberculosis, ravaged his body. I'm watching my grandfather laying in bed so much, and he's in so much pain. He was begging God to kill him and have mercy on him. And then the back door of the hospital where the bodies are rolled out and the mortuary picks you up. I drove past that door 4 or 5 times a day on my way to class. So that was in my head from from 10 to 18, when I graduated college at 21, that was my visual every day. Thinking about, you know, my grandfather begged me, he said, I don't care how long it takes you, always get your education. Get your education. If not, they're going to treat you like they treated me.
Daryl, when did your grandfather learn he had syphilis and that he was intentionally left untreated? And what were his symptoms?
Skin lesions, emphysema, tuberculosis, neurological tremors. I'm not for certain when he was finally treated, but by the time he was treated, it had done its damage on his body internally. And I just know my grandmother, who was his third wife, oddly enough, he outlived all three of his wives. My grandmother he was 31 when he married her, and she was only like 14, 15. So it was like a Color Purple situation. And she died when she was about 3 years younger than I am now. I'm 51. But I don't know if it had any kind of connection, but she died of cancer. And I've had aunts and uncles with health issues, and I got cousins with health issues, and I wholeheartedly believe that it had something to do with the experiment, because respiratory problems, skin problems, like real bad asthma and allergies and all this kind of stuff, it's just prominent in my family on my mother's side. So
did your father ever discuss any feelings of betrayal by the government, by the country in which, you know, he worked and lived in?
My father was retired military. Funny you should ask that. I remember at my age, I am the only one of my siblings and my parents. I'm the only one that was born, quote unquote, free. They were born before the passage of the civil rights legislation. I'm the only one that was born after it in my family. So I remember my father, I asked him one day, I said, why did you go to Vietnam? My dad did 3 tours in Vietnam. I said, why did you go 3 times? He said, well, he said, they treated us better over there than they did in the States. Plus, if something had happened to me, your mother and your brother and your sister and you would have all been taken care of. And that's a heck of a thing to have to do, to go put yourself in harm's way on purpose, not wanting to die, but knowing that if you did die, at least your wife and kids would be taken care of. But you're putting your life on the line for a country that don't care nothing about you. And then while my dad's in Vietnam, my grandmother's dying of cancer. So it's a lot. I mean, my dad joined the military in 1953. He retired in 1975. So he experienced the segregation and the racism and all of that. And then on the flip side, my mother's father, the government gave to him the business too. So I'm just not, that's I guess what you say, a patriotic person, because I have blood in my eye.
Thank you so much, Daryl. So to our friends over at Clubhouse that's tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in to our live panel discussion on the Tuskegee experiment. We do look forward to speaking with you in 30 minutes. I'm going to jump to a question that I have for you, Professor Obi. There's a lot of talk among the Black community concerning fear of taking the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, we cannot endorse this vaccine, nor can we tell anyone not to take it. That decision is personal, and that is one only the individual can decide. But let's talk about the fear. The Tuskegee men were left untreated, even when a cure existed. Here, we have an actual form of treatment for COVID-19, yet many of us are reluctant to take it. Why do you think that is?
That's interesting that you asked that, you know, and I was hoping to be able to respond to the last question that you asked. Excuse me. What's interesting to me, you know, I want to kind of tag onto your last question and move into the next question. What's interesting to me about and Brother Moore, I just got the greatest respect for you. I just really do. I just want to say that before I continue. You were asking about basically the value that this culture puts, or the lack of value this culture puts on Black men. And there's only one group of people that gets less value than Black men. That's Black women. We know that. You know, we know that whole history. The thing that gets me, and tagging on again to something that you said, Brother Moore, was that, you know, we hear about these men, we hear about these men and that were part of this experiment, but nobody talks about the women. And as you have demonstrated, obviously the women suffer too. But, you know, how could you not? I mean, again, what kind of blows my mind about this is that, you know, penicillin was developed to treat syphilis, but penicillin was around for 25 years when in 1972 this study came to a close, and you know, when these people were able to get access to this to penicillin. So you're talking about 25 years when there was a treatment that these people could have, but they were not given the benefit of that. So now you fast forward to now, we got COVID-19. It is very natural for us as Black people to not necessarily trust this vaccine. And then, you know, right now, you know, I've got people that I know that are taking it. I've got people that I know who have passed away from it. I got people that I know who had it and have long-term suffering from it for months and months and months, all these weird kind of symptoms that people have, you know, but it's like, for me personally, you know, it's like, I'm glad to be not quite old enough in the 65-year bracket to get it, so I can kind of observe how other people respond to it, how it affects people. So it's basically, I'm not necessarily trusting people say, hurry up and go get this vaccine. I'm going to certainly get it eventually, but it's going to be after I observe how it manifests, if there's symptoms, how people respond to it and all that before I do it. And if I see that people do well with it, then I'll do it. But I'm not going to just say, you know, I'm going to go and do it. And again, it is partly because of what we're talking about here. We've all been hearing about this Tuskegee. Let me tell you about how I discovered about this Tuskegee experiment. When I was in graduate school, I wanted to do some, I had heard about it, but you know, I didn't know a lot. And I wanted to do some research on the Tuskegee study, again, the untreated syphilis in the Negro male study. But there was very, very, very little primary sources because it was such a secret study. You know, interestingly, it led me to that Tuskegee Airmen research that I did, because that too was an experiment that happened at Tuskegee. You know, that experiment was to see if Black men could fly airplanes, because they said Black men certainly can't fly airplanes. And if you don't know that story, Eleanor Roosevelt happened to be in Tuskegee, and she saw this Black man flying an airplane, and she's like, wait a minute, look at him, he's flying. So that's when they started that experiment. So I said, okay, well, I can't find any primary source on that, so I kind of threw it away and did the research on the Tuskegee Airmen. So it's, and again, you know, so just to kind of wrap it up, I don't want to take all the time from other people. Just to kind of wrap it up, you know, I think that our distrust of the systems of medicine here in this country, and these vaccines and stuff like that, it's only natural. It's like self-preservation. You know, I'm not going to let you just give me this shot. You know, I mean, I don't really like taking flu shots. I haven't taken a flu shot in 5 years. You know, so I mean, we have a reason to be skeptical, particularly if we know this history.
Shanice, what are your thoughts?
Man, so as a person that I had a family member recently as well suffer from the COVID. And I do have a lot of family members who are also in the medical field. So we do have differences of opinions when it comes approaching to this vaccine. And it's definitely not a cure. The vaccine that we have for COVID, it is said that you can still catch COVID after taking it, and you would still have to take a mask. So, you know, as a person that I have studied a lot of my history here in America, It almost kind of gives me the same type of vibes of what we're talking about with the Tuskegee experiment, where it's you're not quite being cured, and you went years. These people went almost a decade or plus not being treated and giving little things, little snacks and things just to kind of win them over to keep coming back to return to the study. But you're not really being treated. And I feel like people, us today especially, how do we not know that we're not part of a study right now? How do we not know that this particular vaccine or whatever the case may be that they're doing isn't a study in itself? I mean, look at the amount of time it took to make the vaccine. As they say, it only took 6+ months. So we essentially could be a part of some type of experimental thing as well. So it definitely would raise a brow for me, especially, given the knowledge that I know of this country and its history, and also being a part of the military system where you kind of don't have a say, you just have to take certain things without questioning. It really makes me wonder what is the, I always ask what's the end game. So even with the syphilis experiment, what was the end game? Was it just that you had to find that penicillin? Was that particular cure or treatment for it? Like, what was the end game for this? And it would feel like to me, because these particular diseases really affect certain demographics more, we then become the guinea pig for how to find the cure. I don't see it just like in the beginning of COVID, and it was just like the narrative was, first it was just Asia, and then it turned into, it was a Black people virus. It was a Black people thing, and only Black people are the ones suffering from this in America. So it's like, the narratives always come back to a Black versus white thing. And at what point do we kind of have to step away? And I'm glad that we're questioning now, what is the narrative? What is the end game? Because it can't keep changing from just something that's affecting everyone to now this is just affecting Black people and Hispanic people.
Right. Janasia, what's your thoughts, Janasia? And how do you feel when you generally see CDC guidelines? How does that make you feel?
I definitely agree with Shanice in that I definitely feel like the vaccine is similar to an experience just because we don't know the long-term effects. Like she said, the vaccine has been developed within 6 months, and we still don't know, okay, 5 years from now, how is this vaccine going to affect people? Even with the flu vaccine, how when it first came out, I'm sure people were a little bit hesitant, and now here we are years later, we still don't know 20 years from now how it's going to affect people. So it definitely poses caution, and I'm not the first person to take the COVID vaccine. I kind of want to wait to see maybe 6 months to see how others react to it before I make the decision to take it. But then I also have, when I am home, I have younger siblings. I have an elderly great grandmother who it will be 93. So I have to think about all of those things. And is it more beneficial for me personally to take it? So I feel like it's more so on a personal level, and you have to take all of those things into consideration, because although it is affecting Black people more, it also has been deadly to elderly people. And also with the CDC guidelines, I feel like a lot of people, I work at Walgreens, and a lot of people come in and like, well, this is America, land of the free, I shouldn't have to wear a mask, like I'm not going to conform to it. But you're also putting other people in danger. And I feel like that's the bigger picture. We have to think about not only ourselves, but the people around us who we are affecting, because that's how it spreads, by affecting other people, not just your own personal choice not to wear a mask or not to, take the vaccine. But there are cautions because of studies like the Tuskegee syphilis study.
May I add something?
Sure.
I want to say this, which is interesting to me as we look at how this whole thing developed, at least how it was kind of given to us, how we found out about it. And I remember, they shut everything down. I was actually in Texas. I had an ill family member that I was with for 3 months in Texas when all this was happening. And first of all, they shut everything down. And then, of course, we have these white supremacists who are in high political offices. And they say, well, okay, let's open up the barbershops, let's open up the gyms, and let's open up, basically they're saying all the places where Black folk go. So they open up all these places, you know, for Black folk to go to beauty shops and all that kind of stuff, which was interesting to me. I'm like, okay, could this be, you know, some intentional thing? But another thing that I really wanted to mention is, okay, now the President of the United States got this virus and he is obese. If you look at him, you can tell he's clearly not in the best health. Same thing with Chris Christie. He probably weighs close to 300 pounds. You know, he got sick, but they had drugs that they gave these people and they healed pretty fast. You know, why is there not any energy going into making these drugs that these people got, who got better really fast? That same, you know, energy is going into vaccines. Why not this energy? Why doesn't this energy go into to what made them better? Make that available for people. You know, Black folk are dying. Give us. If something happens to me, I want the drug that Donald Trump got, that had him doing a drive-by in 3 days. You know, that's what's interesting to me. It's just clearly that it would certainly, as you observe these things, lead to you having mistrust of what the government's telling you about the vaccine and this disease.
Thank you. Darryl, did you want to add something to that?
I was going to ask Denasia, are you at school right now, or have you done online learning?
So this past semester, we were definitely online, but I'm because I am a student leader, we are required to stay on campus. But just because of the position that we have to like giving tours and things like that. We have to be on campus, but going into the spring semester, we do have hybrid classes. So you do have the choice of going to class, but in all of the classrooms, the desks are 6 feet apart. There's not a barrier, but there's tape put around the area where the professor is. And, you know, you can't go within this range. You have to, all the desks are sanitized before we go into the classrooms, all of that. So they're taking a lot of precautions. And even as far as like student activities, all of those are virtual. Even going in, we had a virtual homecoming. So Tuskegee has definitely taken almost every precaution. And obviously you still have people that go out to parties, people that aren't wearing masks and still being around each other because they feel like they're invincible to this disease. But coming from someone who has seen multiple people experience COVID-19, and I've seen people who felt like it was the end for them, this is definitely not something that you want to play with at all. Like I've seen people beg to be relieved of COVID immediately. So yeah,
I've lost in the last 9 months 4 of my classmates from Tuskegee.
Wow.
So it's nothing to play with, and I work in the health field. So I was wondering how they were handling it down there, but I'm skeptical of taking the treatment, but I know I have to because I'm in a medical field. So I'm in the healthcare field. I have to take it, or I'm not gonna have a job. But I like in the saying, I'm kind of waiting to see how it affects other people before, because at my age, I can't risk anything. I'm older. I'm 51, so I have to be careful when I do something. I just can't. I'm not in my 20s anymore. If I get a shot, I get sick, I go to the hospital and I bounce back quicker. No, it don't work that way. I may not bounce back.
Thank you. I know there's so many of us Americans that share your sentiment, that are in the same exact predicament. So these men, the Tuskegee men, were told that they had bad blood by government doctors working for the CDC. You know, we've already established that they were not told that it was syphilis. There is no proof that these men were ever actually injected with the venereal disease. There's only speculation, which I believe came from a film about the Tuskegee experiment. And in that film, they portrayed it as these men were injected. But till this day, there really is no actual proof. But I want to ask each of you, what do you think of the possibilities that these men could have been injected? And I will start with, I'm going to go ahead and start this question with Janasia.
I feel like it's definitely very likely. If you think about how the flu vaccine is developed, it gives you a small strain, a less symptomatic strain of the flu just so that your immune system is able to build up, so that if you do get the flu, you're able to fight it off quicker. So I definitely feel like they were injected with syphilis, even if it wasn't a stronger strain or if it wasn't as potent, they definitely were. And that's just from having to, as an ambassador, we have to study all of Tuskegee's history, like from since before July 4th, 1881 to the present history of Tuskegee. And just the amount of people and how much traction the hospital had at that time with the symptoms that were related. There's a lot of evidence supporting that they actually were given syphilis. And not all of the men that were a part of the study were given syphilis. It was like 301 to like the 199 or however the breakdown is, but the ones that were given it, not only did they experience symptoms of syphilis who participated in the study, but their wives experienced it. And even the women that were pregnant, they then gave birth to babies that still had symptoms of syphilis. So I feel like it's very likely that they were injected with syphilis.
Thank you, Janasia. I'm gonna allow in this order, Obi, Moore, and then Shanice to add to that. And just please leave your responses to a maximum of 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go really fast. Certainly, I mean, if you do the research, it'll say that the study involved 600 men and 399 of them had syphilis and 201 did not have it. So it does not say that they actually injected these men with syphilis. It doesn't say that. But I think if I had to vote, I would say yes, they did. And the reason why I would say that, you got to think about the history of this country. And then one example I want to use is this doctor called James Marion Sims, who was known as the father of modern gynecology, who did all these experiments on enslaved women. In 1876, he was named the president of the American Medical Association. He was also the president of the American Gynecological Society. He also had statues erected to him, for his work in gynecology, but he did all this on the backs of these Black women. And they many times, they didn't have any anesthesia. They didn't have the right to consent and say, no, I don't want to do this. They were enslaved women. So all the knowledge that he got from these enslaved women doing these medical experiments, got him exalted to have statues all over the country of him. So, certainly I believe that they probably, just to wrap up, answer your question, I know it's a minute. Certainly I believe that that they injected these men with syphilis.
Thank you. More?
Yes, they injected these men. No doubt in my mind, they injected these men with the disease so they could watch and see what would happen to them over time. And had it not been for men like Charles Wilson, who was a medic in the military, they probably never would have been caught even in the 70s. He stole penicillin and he was sneaking and treating some of these men. But they don't tell you about that. So yes, they did this on purpose to these men just to watch and see what would happen to them. And they didn't care what would happen to their wives and children, or their girlfriends or anything, or their pregnant wives giving birth to children with birth defects. They didn't care.
Thank you.
Yes. So I definitely am with everyone else. I believe that they were definitely injected. And it kind of reminds me, because if you look at just a few decades later, the next epidemic we had was HIV. So it seems like in the Black community, it was like this time after time, these new viruses that just come out the blue, this automatically devastates only our community. So I definitely feel that way. I also am going to feel that way because of the history of the woman named of Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks was the woman who unknowingly her cells were stolen, and they've been used to cure or to basically create different types of cures and treatments for various different diseases, and especially cancer. So we're dealing at a time period where the African American still wasn't seen as a fully human. We were still under that 3/5, even though they didn't outright say it at this particular time. But I do believe that they still were carrying that tradition of, oh, we're just kind of like this test tube people. Also, I'm just going to add on the fact that around this same time, we have to look at the fact that Hitler, prior to this experiment happening, Hitler had contracted syphilis over out in Germany, and it was reoccurring. So one had to ask the question: was this once again something that was affecting a certain demographic, and they needed to use another set of people to find the cure within? Because it just kind of doesn't make sense how these things just come out the blue. And then the minute they test your blood, it's, oh, look, you have this. And it's like, well, when did I start having that? I didn't start having it until I came here in this facility. So I think it's a long history of America playing that Houdini trick of letting us know or telling us that we are the bad blood, or we are the bad people. We are bad. We're this. When we look at their history, and it's a long history of bloodshed. It's a long history of sacrificing. It's a long history of this basically tearing down communities, bombing communities, as we talked about last time. It's a long history of bloodshed on this particular demographic's hands that our people continuously, till today, as we see with COVID, today, now in America, America doesn't have the most COVID-19 deaths. It's actually in England, they have the most as of today. But in America, the virus is still seen as a Black people thing. It's just kind of show you how cruel Black has always been synonymous with something that has to be treated, something that has to be cured.
Thank you for that. So I'm gonna just leave you guys with this question before we start to wrap it up. What do you think that the CDC can do to instill African Americans' faith in them as a public health organization with all the damage done? Is there anything that you think can happen to turn around and gain our trust? And I'll let you answer that first, Obi.
Well, the first thing they could do is stop treating Black folk like subhumans. There's been a long history of that. And we couldn't have this discussion without bringing up Dr. Susan Moore, who recently died of COVID, and she was in the hospital doing these lives and stuff, begging people to help her and saying that these people wouldn't help her. And she complained about the medical treatment she was getting, and it went viral. She was asking specifically for a drug that she knew that would help her. They wouldn't give it to her. She was basically trying to treat herself, saying that she needed a CT scan and all this kind of thing. And they didn't do anything then. She literally said, these people are going to kill me. She said that, and she died. So, as you're exposed to this kind of stuff and you're seeing these people happen, this woman, literally you watching this woman begging for her life, and then you hear that she's died. I mean, that kind of stuff can't be happening if you expect people to trust, what the CDC and what the medical community here in this country tells you. You're not going to trust it if you're seeing that kind of stuff as a Black person.
Thank you. Janasia, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I genuinely think that it's gonna take Black people seeing Black people in those positions. I feel like it's easier for you to hear it from someone that looks like you. It's easier for you to take treatment from someone who has who feels the same, or who has experienced the same feeling that you have of going to the hospital. Are they actually going to treat me? Or are they going to give me something just to deal with the pain for right now? Or could this be another study? There's always research going on. It seems like Black people are always the first one. Hey, would you like to try this new experiment or this new drug that we're testing out? And I feel like having Black people in those spaces as doctors, researchers on these teams is going to build that trust in one another, because how I feel going into this. So I can trust you if I see myself in that position.
Thank you. More?
They're going to have to be more transparent with their records and their information. And it's just funny. I used to live in Atlanta before I moved here to Ohio. And I live walking distance from the CDC. It's just crazy. With all of my went through my grandfather. Then right before I moved up north, I lived walking distance from the CDC. And You could probably get into the White House quicker than you could get into the CDC. They're very secretive. Any disease you can imagine on this earth, they have samples of it at the CDC. Anything you can think of, Ebola, stuff you probably don't even know exists yet, they got samples of it at the CDC. And I used to walk past this place because it's right on the edge of Emory University's campus and the hospital system. It's right there. And I live right around the corner. They're going to have to be transparent. That's something that the government has never done. And I'm not going to hold my breath, but that's the only thing that would make me trust the CDC.
Transparency is fair. So in 1974, the government agreed to give any living participant $37,500 and heirs of the deceased $15,000. There was no reprimands for doctors, no apologies until Clinton made an apology in May of 1997. And no one admitted to any wrongdoing. So my question is, first to you, Darryl, and then to whomever else who wants to chime in. If you have 30 seconds, please, if you can keep it to that.
Okay.
What does an apology mean for the descendants? What does an apology mean? And what do you think about the monetary value placed on the lives of the participants?
That money was an insult, but had it not been for Fred Gray fighting so hard, my grandfather would have never got that. My grandfather's whole life, he sharecropped. So when he got that money, he bought his own land. He said, my descendants will have some land. And he bought a house and some land. That's what he did. And when he died, they paid for the funeral.
Well, I think apology, if it's connected to some money, like Brother Moore, and that just blew my mind that he was able to go through this and get property for his family. That's a great sacrifice, really it is.
Yeah.
But the thing of, I kind of did the math when I was kind of doing a little research, and you mentioned 1974, that judgment was for $10 million, was out of court. And it was so that kind of added up to be about $16,000 for everybody who was a part of it, which is really is not a lot of money. It's a lot more money in 74 than it is now, obviously. Obviously, it was enough for this man to buy some property. But again, I think that those apologies mean more when you got some cash attached to it.
Okay, Janasia?
I agree. It definitely, when you have the monetary value behind it, it's more. But the only thing, it's an apology. It's like, we're sorry that we basically tormented you for 40 years, even though it started in 1932 and the cure was found in 1947, and it's still, there was no type of treatment until the 1970s. So I feel like the apology was kind of like almost a slap in the face to everyone who had been involved in it, not just the men, but the people that were affected in the community. Because not only were the treatment that they received, they initially had to pay for it themselves. It wasn't just completely free. So the money that they received, I know wasn't enough. And it kind of was like, this is what we're doing because there's really no explanation. There's no apology for what we've done.
Thank you so much. As we are approaching the hour, we have to bring the Facebook Live portion of this discussion to a close. I would like to hear in just a couple seconds from you guys on what jewels you like to drop to the audience tonight. What should they take away from this discussion? And please share your websites and social media handles so that people can follow your work.
Let's start with Shanice.
Yes, just to go back to 2 questions ago, what they can do to gain our trust, I'll say quickly, is that you have to start treating us like humans on a local level. You can't just send out vaccines and different treatments, and on a local level, we can't even get proper nurses and doctors to even hear our cries of pain. We still have Black women dying at a higher rate from childbirth. We still have Black men being ignored for their pain and suffering that they're going through with different various diseases. So we have to start on a local level. As we say with politics, it stops at a local level where you can see, touch, and feel. Also, I guess my last gems would be as well as what we're doing tonight, have the discussions, have the well-needed disagreements. I have people that are in the medical field and they're for it, and I'm against certain things that the government issues. So if you want to find me, You definitely can find me on Twitter. My Twitter is the real Shan Joer. And then you can also visit my website. My website is shanjorco, that's SHANJORCO.com. And I sell organic health products and different beauty products that are basically plant-based. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Obi.
Well, you know, the one little gem I want to drop, and you know, I'm happy to do this. I want to just say to you young ladies, Ms. Webb and Ms. Trina, you know, you all are young, and just for you all to be, you know, having this discussion, and I want to say to everybody who's watching this, you know, support these young women and what they're doing, because it's so important that this, you know, this history gets delivered to these young people and the people that you'll have access to. So share this stuff and talk about her film, Betrayal of a Nation, which I've had the blessing to be a part of that film. It's just so important that you all deliver this to the young generation. And I'm an old guy now. Well, not that. Oh, well, I am. But anyway, it's just really important. I just want to express the importance of what they're doing. You can reach me. Obviously, I'm a professor at Clark Atlanta University. You can reach me via email, moby@cau.edu, and I'm happy to respond to anybody who sends me a message.
Thank you. Janasia?
Hi. One gem that I would definitely like to drop is that do your research. You know, yes, I am an ambassador, but I had to find the information, and you know, I find like I'm thoroughly involved in all of the history of like all of the wives of the presidents, and I feel like they had a big impact on Tuskegee's history, and not just Tuskegee's history, but Black history. It's an honor to be a Black woman in America and getting an education at an HBCU. So I advise everybody to do their own research and fact check things that you see on Twitter, fact check things that you see on Facebook, you know, have those tough discussions, because that's how we learn more. And that's what brings us together. And my social medias, it's Janasia, JANXSIA on all social media platforms. So yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Janasia. And the Honorable Daryl Moore.
Thank you. Thank you. My website is more, MOORE-ENT.com. All my social media links are there. I want to leave you with one thing. Because of him, I'm here. That's my grandfather.
Thank you.
Don't forget him. Don't forget any of these men that went through what they went through. But I have a personal connection. That man right there and what he went through was the motivation for me to get my education and to finish high school and go to college. I'm his first grandson to get a college degree.
Wow.
I'm the first one.
Thank
Brother
you.
Moore, it's been an honor just to hear you, brother. It really has been. I want to say that. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This was a wonderful, thought-provoking conversation that we had tonight. And Trina and I would like to thank each of our panelists for participating tonight. Please, to those of you watching, please follow their pages. I also want to thank you guys for tuning in here on Facebook as well as Clubhouse. The conversation will continue on Clubhouse, questions and comments from the audience. If you haven't already, follow us on IG, that's Instagram for those of you who don't know, and Facebook at Betrayal of a Nation, and on Twitter, it's at Betrayed Nation. Click the link. We have a Facebook group that we just started for supporters of the Betrayal of a Nation documentary. So we ask that if you would like to get more information about the film and know when it will be released, please join and sign up. A link will be posted in the comments once this live is done with, where you can just click on and go ahead and join that group. 2 people from the group will randomly be chosen to win access to watch the documentary for free once it is released. And other than that, I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you, everyone. Thanks again to the panelists. Thank you to the viewers. And good night, Facebook.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.